My name is Ruby, I'm 32, and last year my entire life collapsed in one single morning. My twin sister, someone I trusted more than anyone, stole my identity and left me to face the damage. And when I ran to my dad for help, he shocked me more than she ever did. What happened next changed everything. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more family drama, emotional courage, and real-life stories. I still remember the exact sound my phone made that morning. It wasn't the usual soft buzz of a text message. It was a sharp, repeating ding, ding, ding. Almost like my phone was trying to warn me that something terrible was happening. I was half asleep, wrapped in a blanket on my small bed when I rolled over to check it. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. At first, I thought the credit alerts were some kind of glitch. 4 messages. Then 7. Then 13. My eyes could barely keep up. Each one said the same thing. New purchase on your account. The amounts kept getting bigger. A few hundred. Then hundreds more. Then 1,000 at a store I'd never been to. I sat up fast, my heart racing, scrolling through them with shaking fingers. I whispered, "This can't be real." But every alert said it was. I didn't even have some of these cards. And the ones I did have, I hadn't used them in weeks. I tried calling the bank's helpline right away, but my voice kept catching in my throat. It was too early in the morning for my brain to make sense of what was happening. I walked to the kitchen, brewed some coffee, and held the mug between my hands just to calm the shaking. But even the warm cup couldn't stop the cold fear running through me. When the bank finally answered, the woman on the line spoke slowly, clearly, the way customer service people do when they're trying to soften bad news. She confirmed that someone had used my name, my address, and my social security number to open 2 new credit cards. She said the charges had been made in stores across town, electronic shops, a furniture outlet, and even a few online purchases. "Are you sure these aren't yours?" she asked gently. I felt embarrassed even though I knew I didn't do anything wrong. My voice cracked. "No, I don't know anything about them." She believed me. I could hear the concern in her voice. She said she'd freeze everything, but she recommended I come into the bank in person so they could talk through it. So I grabbed my keys, threw on a sweater, and drove there feeling like I was floating outside my own body. When I walked into the bank, the manager, Mr. Anderson, greeted me. He knew me because I'd been a customer for years. I'd always kept things organized, paid on time, stayed careful. His eyebrows pulled together as he looked at the computer screen. Then he looked up at me and said something that made my stomach drop. "Ruby, the person who opened these accounts had your ID. They verified everything. It matched exactly." I froze. My ID was in my wallet. My wallet hadn't been lost or stolen. Nobody had borrowed it. My voice came out as a whisper. "But that's impossible." Mr. Anderson gently explained that whoever did this had shown a physical driver's license with my information. He said it wasn't unusual for a scammer to create a copy if they had access to someone's personal documents. I stared at him, confused, scared, and unable to process it all. I had no idea who could have done it. I was a quiet, simple person. I worked part-time at a diner. I lived with my dad temporarily while saving up for my own place again. I didn't have enemies. I barely had friends. So who would want to steal from me? Driving home felt like driving through fog. My thoughts kept circling. And somewhere deep inside, a painful suspicion started forming. But I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my own twin sister could do this. When I stepped into the house, Dad was sitting at the table reading his newspaper like he always did on weekends. My twin sister, Raven, was at the counter eating cereal. She looked up casually like nothing in the world was wrong. I sat down across from Dad and tried to tell him what happened. My voice trembled. Someone stole my identity. They opened credit cards under my name. Thousands of dollars. I waited for comfort, or support, or even just a moment of silence. But Dad didn't look shocked. He didn't look worried. He folded his newspaper slowly, calmly, and sighed like he'd been waiting for this. "I knew something like this was coming," he said quietly. "You've been careless lately, Ruby. Forgetting things. Making poor choices." I blinked. "What?" "No, Dad, I didn't." He held up a hand. "Your sister tried to warn me. She said you've been acting strange. She told me you might be hiding something." My breath left my body. I stared at Raven. She looked at me with the softest, fakest sympathy. Ruby, I didn't want to say anything, but you've been stressed. Maybe you forgot you signed up for something? It happens. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were cold. And in that exact moment, everything clicked. My missing mail. Her random questions about my bills. The week she asked to borrow my laptop. The day she hung around while I was sorting through my papers. The gut feeling I kept pushing away. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a mistake. It was her. But when I said, "You did this," she gasped dramatically. She even placed a hand on her chest. Me? Ruby, that's not fair. I'm trying to help. And Dad believed her. He always believed her. He always saw her as the responsible one. The calm one. The steady one. And me? I was always the one who had to prove myself twice as hard. I never imagined he'd take her side this easily. But he did. His face hardened. I can't have this kind of behavior in my house. You need to figure this out. You need to take responsibility for your choices. I shook my head, fighting back tears. But I didn't do anything. He didn't budge. Not even an inch. He walked into my room, grabbed an old duffel bag, tossed it onto the bed, and told me to pack whatever I needed, until I got myself sorted out. I remember standing there frozen while he waited in the doorway. My hands moved on their own, folding clothes, grabbing shoes, picking up a toothbrush, while my mind screamed that this couldn't be real. Raven leaned against the hallway wall, watching me, not saying a word, not even pretending to be sorry. The last thing Dad said before I walked out the door was, "I hope you get help, Ruby." It wasn't anger that broke me. It wasn't even fear. It was the way he said help, like I was the problem, like I had done this to myself, like I wasn't worth believing. I stepped outside with my duffel bag, closed the door behind me, and felt the cool air hit my face. I stood there on the porch with nowhere to go, no plan, and no idea what the next hour would look like. I heard the lock click behind me. A soft sound, but it felt like a door shutting on my entire life. That was the moment everything changed. That was the night I stopped being the daughter who tried to make everyone happy, and became the woman who had to save herself. And I had no idea then that the storm had only just begun. When I heard the door click behind me, the quiet sound echoed louder than any argument I had ever had inside that house. I walked down the front steps slowly, almost like my legs weren't fully connected to me. The evening air felt damp. The sky was dim, and the streetlights had begun to flicker on. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. All I had was a duffel bag that felt heavier with every step I took. I reached my car, sat in the driver's seat, and immediately felt the exhaustion hit me. The shock was fading, replaced by a dull ache behind my eyes. I rested my hands on the steering wheel, trying to gather myself, but my breath kept catching. I didn't want to cry, but the tears came anyway, slow at first, then faster. I wiped them quickly, embarrassed even though no one was there to see me. I didn't want to drive far. I didn't trust myself to focus. So I started the engine and pulled into a grocery store parking lot a few streets away. The store was closed, but the big bright sign still lit up the lot. I parked near the back where no one would bother me. I kept telling myself it was just for one night. Just one night to figure things out. I leaned my seat back and covered myself with a thin jacket I kept in the car. But sleep didn't come easy. Every sound startled me. A shopping cart rattling somewhere. A car passing by too fast. The chirp of a security alarm from a nearby store. My mind wouldn't settle. I kept replaying Dad's face, Raven's fake concern, the bank manager's calm voice. Everything collided into a storm I couldn't escape. Around 3 a.m. I finally drifted off. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight was hitting my windshield. People were walking in and out of the grocery store. And for a moment I forgot where I was. Then reality rushed back. I sat up quickly, embarrassed even though no one was paying attention to me. My stomach growled loudly. I dug through my purse, found $5, and went inside to buy a small sandwich and a bottle of water. I ate in the car, trying to think clearly. Even though everything inside me felt broken, I knew I had to keep moving. Later that morning I drove to work. The diner was always busy on weekends. When I walked in through the back door, the smell of coffee, bacon, and warm biscuits greeted me. For the first time that day, I felt something familiar. Something steady. My coworker Maria noticed me right away. She placed a hand on my arm and said, "Honey, You look like you've been through a lot. Are you all right? Her voice was soft, and her eyes were full of concern. I almost cried again, but I swallowed it. I'm okay, I whispered. Just dealing with some things. She didn't pry. She never did. Instead, she covered for me while I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. The shift was long. Customers asked for refills, extra napkins, substitutions for meals, and boxes to take leftovers home. Usually, the routine of serving people distracted me, but that day I felt like I was moving underwater. My mind kept drifting back to the porch, the locked door, and the look in Dad's eyes when he told me to leave. When my shift ended, I didn't want to go back to the grocery store parking lot. I sat in my car staring at the steering wheel, unsure what to do next. That's when I heard a soft knock on my window. It was Maria. I rolled the window down. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Ruby, you don't have to tell me what's going on, but I can see you're not okay. Do you need a place to stay tonight? I froze. Part of me wanted to say no, I didn't want to be a burden. But another part of me felt desperate for something stable, even if just for a night. I nodded slowly. Her apartment wasn't fancy. It was small with mismatched furniture and a slightly squeaky couch. But it was warm, safe, and quiet. She handed me a blanket and said, "Stay as long as you need to. I won't ask questions until you're ready." That kindness shook me more than anything else that week. That night, I lay awake on her couch. Not out of fear, but because my mind finally had enough space to think. To really think. Dad hadn't believed me. Raven had lied so smoothly it scared me. And I had nowhere left to turn except myself. It was the first time in my life that I felt completely painfully alone. But it was also the first time I realized that if I didn't start fighting for myself, no one else would. The next morning I woke early. I helped Maria wash dishes, sweep the kitchen floor, and take out her trash even though she told me I didn't have to. She appreciated the gesture. I could tell. I went to work again, but this time I felt more alert. More grounded. During my break, I sat in the back room looking through the list of fraudulent charges on my phone. I studied every store name, every date, every location. A pattern began to form, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed facts. Real facts. Later that week, I decided to visit one of the stores listed in the alerts. It was a small electronics shop across town. When I walked in, a young man at the register greeted me. "Hi there, can I help you?" he asked. I showed him my ID and explained what happened. He frowned thoughtfully and said, "Let me get the manager." A middle-aged woman with glasses approached. She listened carefully, then said something I didn't expect. "I remember her. The woman who bought from us looked just like you, but her hair was a little straighter. She bought a laptop and a few accessories." My heart raced. I kept my voice steady. "Did she say anything?" The manager shrugged. "She didn't talk much. Just said she needed the items for work." My throat tightened. That was something Raven would say. Before I left, the manager wrote down her name and contact number in case I needed anything else. It wasn't evidence, not officially, but it was enough to push me forward. Over the next few days I went to more stores. Some employees barely remembered the customer. Others described someone who looked exactly like me. Same height, same build, same face, but with slightly different posture or voice tone. Every detail felt like a punch to the gut. After the fourth store, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel with both hands. My head was spinning, but a cold, steady determination settled inside me. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't losing control. Someone who shared my face had done all of this. And she wasn't a stranger. One evening, when I returned to Maria's apartment, she was sitting at the tiny dining table sorting through bills. She looked up and asked gently, "Did anything get better today?" I hesitated before answering. "Not yet, but I'm learning what really happened." She nodded like she understood. "Good. You deserve the truth, whatever it is." Her words stayed with me long after she went to bed. Over the next couple of weeks, I worked extra shifts at the diner. I saved every dollar I could. I still stayed on the couch, but Maria didn't complain. Sometimes we watched old TV shows together. Sometimes we talked about simple things, recipes, weather, neighborhood stories. And those moments helped me stay grounded while my life slowly rebuilt itself. But even with all the warmth she offered, I couldn't stop thinking about the damage done to my name. I had always been careful with money. I had always tried to be honest and responsible. Yet I was now the one sleeping on someone else's couch while the person who had caused all this was probably sleeping comfortably in my old room. One night I went through my old emails. Not looking for anything in particular, just trying to keep my mind busy. That's when I stumbled on something odd. A message from an online store confirming an order I never made. When I clicked the link, I spotted the delivery address. It wasn't Dad's house. And it wasn't mine. It was an address just a few blocks from Raven's workplace. A chill ran through me. I opened another email and saw something similar. A delivery location that matched a place she visited often. Not direct proof, but too close to be coincidence. I sat back on the couch and closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces were beginning to align, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer ignore. I wasn't just learning to survive. I was learning to stand on my own step by painful step. And while no one believed me yet, I was slowly, quietly gathering the strength to face the people who had turned their backs on me. I didn't sleep much the night before everything began. My mind kept replaying the moment I realized I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to save me. No one believed me, not Dad, not my sister's friends, not even the bank at first. If I wanted the truth to come out, I had to find it myself. So early the next morning, with a small notebook in my pocket and my nerves tightened like a knot, I decided to trace every place tied to the charges made under my name. The first stop was a discount electronics store on the edge of town. The kind of place where the lights buzzed overhead and the aisles were packed with boxed gadgets stacked half crooked. I walked up to the counter, trying to sound steady when I asked the young employee about a purchase made under the name Ruby Lawson. He looked it up, then glanced at me with this puzzled expression. "You were just here about a week ago," he said. "Bought a tablet and some headphones." That hit me hard. "Could you tell me what the buyer looked like?" I asked. He shrugged at first like he didn't want to get involved. But then his eyes shifted, and he leaned a little closer. "Well, she looked like you," he said. "Same face, same hair, same everything. Except she talked a little faster." That same face part made my stomach drop. I thanked him and stepped back outside, letting the cool air settle my breathing. Shouldn't have surprised me. I knew I had a twin. I knew she carried the same features I did. But hearing a stranger describe her like they were describing me, it added a weight I wasn't prepared for. It meant she wasn't just using my name. She was wearing my life like it belonged to her. My next stop was a clothing store downtown. The kind where the staff always seemed too busy to look up, but I tried anyway. A middle-aged woman at the register flipped through their system, then sighed when she saw the transaction. "Oh yeah," she said. "The lady who used your name bought 2 coats and a pair of winter boots. Sweet girl, though." She asked about my son's college plans. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because my sister had always been good at that. Smooth, warm, friendly when she wanted to be. I asked the woman if she remembered anything specific. "Actually," she said, squinting like she was trying to pull the memory into focus, "she had a tiny scar on her chin." My breath froze. My sister had that scar. She got it when we were 13 after tripping on the sidewalk. I didn't have it. She did. That was the first physical detail separating us. And still no one, not Dad, not the bank, had looked beyond the surface. As I walked out of the store, I felt this strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because I had more proof. Disappointment because the world around me had been fooled so easily, and I'd been left carrying the damage she caused. I reached the third store on my list, a small home goods shop run by a father and son. The place smelled like candles and old wood polish. The son recognized the name Ruby Lawson the moment I mentioned it. "You came in right before closing," he said. "Bought some kitchen items. You were in a hurry." This time I didn't even ask for a description. I just asked one question. "Do you have any camera footage from that day?" He looked at his dad, who stood behind him. The older man watched me for a moment. Really watched me, like he could see the exhaustion behind my eyes. Finally he nodded. "She looked like you. But something in your face, your eyes, they're different," he murmured. If only my family could see that difference. They led me to a tiny office in the back where an old monitor sat on a metal desk. The video wasn't high quality, but it was clear enough. And there she was, my twin, carrying 2 shopping bags, walking with my posture, wearing my jacket. using my name. I felt a sharp twist inside me. It wasn't anger, at least not at first. It was grief. I didn't recognize the person on the screen, even though she shared my features. She laughed with the cashier, tapping her nails on the counter the way she always did when she felt clever. Watching her walk out the door felt like watching a version of me I never wanted to become. I asked if I could record the footage on my phone. The manager nodded again, giving me a small, sympathetic smile. "Hope this helps you," he said. "It does," I whispered. "More than you know." My next stop was the bank connected to the largest charges. I didn't expect much. Banks weren't usually helpful unless you brought a mountain of evidence with you. But I was lucky that morning. The banker available to speak with me was an older man named Mr. Carter. He had a calm, steady way of speaking that made me feel like he actually cared. I explained the situation carefully, avoiding dramatic wording. I handed him my ID and showed him the printouts of the fraudulent transactions. He studied everything thoughtfully before asking, "Are you saying someone impersonated you?" "Yes," I said. "And I know exactly who it was." He hesitated, then stood. "Let me check something." A few minutes later he came back with a folder. Inside was a copy of a signature, supposedly mine, used when the card was issued. It wasn't even close to my real signature. "You see this loop?" he said, pointing. "The customer who signed this tried to mimic your handwriting, but didn't do a great job." I nodded, my chest tightening. "Did the signer show ID?" I asked. He nodded. "She did. Driver's license. It had your name." But I remember thinking the photo looked slightly different. My heart dropped again. My sister must have used an old photo of me, one taken before I cut my hair shorter. "Could you describe the person?" I said quietly. He took a slow, thoughtful breath. "Taller than you, I think. Sharper cheekbones. Same eyes. Same smile. But she didn't feel like you." Hard to explain. I understood exactly what he meant. My sister and I shared the same genes, but our presence, the energy we carried, couldn't have been more different. When I left the bank, I found myself sitting in my car longer than I planned. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, letting the silence wrap around me. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't losing control of my own life. Someone else was stealing it. That evening, while organizing the evidence on my bed, I found something I hadn't expected. A set of old text messages from my sister. They were from a year before any of the big charges appeared. At first they looked harmless. Random comments about borrowing my jacket, asking if she could stop by my apartment, saying she needed to use my Wi-Fi because hers was acting up. But as I scrolled, the messages took on a different tone. "Hey, what's your email login again? I forgot the password. Can I get your old bank routing number? I'm helping mom with something. What was your high school mascot? I'm filling out a form and it might come up." I had brushed those questions off back then, thinking she just needed help. Twins grew up sharing so much. It didn't feel strange to share small details. And she'd always been confident, persuasive, smooth in a way that made you trust her without realizing you were doing it. Now, as I reread them with new eyes, I saw the pattern. She had been collecting my life piece by piece. Not out of desperation. Not out of necessity. But because she wanted what I had, even if it meant hollowing out parts of me. That realization hurt more than anything else I'd learned that week. For the first time in days, I stopped pacing the apartment. I stopped arguing with myself. I stopped wondering why she did it, or whether she'd ever feel sorry. Emotional explanations weren't helping me survive. Maybe they never had. Instead, I spread everything out on the kitchen table. The notes from store employees, the printed statements, the grainy camera footage, my conversation notes from the bank, even the old text messages. I stared at it all like a giant puzzle. None of the pieces were large enough to stand alone. But together, they painted a picture even my father couldn't ignore. I knew I needed one last thing. A moment where she couldn't hide behind excuses, charm, or misdirection. A moment where the truth would hit her with nowhere to run. That moment came sooner than I expected. Dad called that night. His voice was stiff, almost forced, as he told me our extended family was planning a reunion the following weekend. He said he wanted me to come to keep the peace, as if my presence was the problem and not the mess my twin had created. For the first time in weeks, I didn't argue. "Sure," I said quietly. "I'll be there." But inside, a new clarity settled over me. This wasn't just a reunion. This was an opportunity. If no one believed me before, that was about to change. And for once, I wasn't walking into a situation unprepared. I had a plan. A slow, steady, step-by-step path that would reveal the truth in a way not even my sister could talk her way out of. My life had been torn apart quietly. Now quietly I was gathering the pieces back. And the next time I saw her, I wouldn't be the scared, forgotten twin she pushed aside. I'd be the sister who finally stood up. When Dad told me about the reunion, I agreed without giving myself room to second guess. But after the call ended, my whole apartment felt like it shifted. The quiet around me wasn't just silence anymore, it was a countdown. I sat there at my kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence I'd collected, and let the reality sink in. I was walking straight into the one place where my sister always felt untouchable. The place where she could smile, make a joke, hug our relatives, and convince everyone she was the good twin. While I stood in her shadow like I had since childhood. But this time would be different. I wasn't walking in blind or begging to be heard. I was walking in with the truth. The reunion was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at my Aunt Linda's house. A 2-story place with a wide porch, a garden full of wind chimes, and a driveway that usually filled with cars before anyone even knocked. For years, those gatherings had been full of food, loud conversations, and the comfort of relatives who didn't care who made what mistake as long as everyone ate well and stayed until sunset. But the thought of stepping into that space now made my stomach twist. It wasn't fear of the family. It was the fear of facing my sister in front of them. The fear that she might spin a story faster than I could show the truth. The fear that Dad would take her side again out of habit. Still, the plan depended on one thing. She had to be caught exactly as she was. A performer who didn't know the script was about to change. Saturday crept up faster than I expected. I stood in front of my small bathroom mirror, brushing my hair into a simple ponytail. I didn't want anything flashy. I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. I wanted to look exactly like myself, calm, steady, and unshaken. I wore jeans, a soft sweater, and the small silver earrings Mom gave me before she passed. They made me feel grounded, like she was reminding me I wasn't walking into this alone. Before leaving, I slipped the folder of evidence into my tote bag. Carefully organized, each page in a sleeve so nothing would get bent or lost. My phone held the video footage and the audio notes I'd recorded throughout the investigation. Everything was ready. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, and the sky had that faded blue tone that always came before fall fully settled in. My car engine hummed softly, but my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I kept thinking about Dad's voice when he'd invited me. There had been no warmth in it. No apology. Just obligation. "You should come," he'd said. "It's important we all show up." Show up. That's all I ever did. And somehow I was the one pushed out when things went wrong. I drove slowly, giving myself time to breathe. By the time I turned onto Aunt Linda's street, cars were already lining the curb. Laughter floated through the air, and kids ran across the lawn holding paper cups of lemonade. It felt like walking into a movie I used to star in but had been written out of. I parked on the opposite side of the street and watched the house for a moment. People hugged on the porch. Someone carried a tray of cookies inside. My cousin waved at someone pulling up behind me, and then I saw her. My twin. She stepped out of a silver sedan, her hair curled, her clothes neatly pressed, her smile easy and charming. She lifted a dish covered in foil and waved at a relative who rushed to greet her. She looked like she belonged there more than anyone else. She always had. A strange calm settled over me. Not the shaky kind. The steady kind. The kind that comes when you know you're finally ready to stop running. I got out of my car and walked toward the house, my steps slow but sure. A few relatives noticed me and smiled, some waving, some surprised to see me after everything that happened. But no one said anything hurtful. No one pulled away. They just welcomed me in quietly, and that small kindness soothed something inside my chest. My sister noticed me halfway up the walkway. Her smile flickered for half a second, like a light bulb struggling to stay on. She adjusted the dish in her hands and forced a bright expression. "Ruby, you made it," she said, her voice too cheerful. "I did," I replied softly. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for signs of anger or hesitation. I gave her none. I wanted her to feel unsure. I wanted her to worry why I looked so calm. She stepped closer. "I hope we can keep things peaceful today," she whispered, pretending to fix her hair. "I hope so too," I said. "But peace depends on honesty, right?" She blinked, her confidence slipping for just a moment. And that tiny fracture, that little crack in her performance, gave me more courage than anything else could have. Inside, the house was warm and full of chatter. Every table was covered in food, and Aunt Linda's famous apple pies filled the room with the scent of cinnamon. Relatives moved around in small groups, catching up on work, kids, travel plans, everything I'd missed since being pushed out of the family narrative. Dad stood near the back door, holding a glass of iced tea. His eyes widened a little when he saw me, but he didn't step forward. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I'd been. He just said, "Glad you made it," in a tone that felt rehearsed. I nodded politely. "I'm here like you asked." He nodded back, but his attention drifted to my sister the moment she walked in behind me. She beamed at him like she hadn't done anything wrong. "Dad, I brought the casserole you love," she said, lifting the foil-covered dish. He took it from her and smiled, completely ignoring the storm brewing between us. I didn't react. I knew what my sister was doing, establishing her good daughter image before anything unfolded. She always worked ahead, always charmed the room first. It used to make me feel invisible, but now, watching her perform, I felt something different, like I was observing a play instead of being trapped inside it. I walked toward the living room and sat on the armrest of a couch, keeping my tote bag close. Several cousins approached, asking what I'd been up to, making small talk that felt gentle and honest. It reminded me that not everyone had doubted me, just the people who should have supported me most. My sister floated through the room greeting everyone, laughing loudly, telling stories. She acted like my presence was nothing but a detail. But I watched her closely. Every time she passed by me, her smile tightened. Her eyes flicked toward my bag. She knew I didn't come empty-handed. And that's when something shifted. For the first time, she looked nervous. The moment everything began to unravel came from something small, a cousin's question at the dinner table. We were all sitting or standing around the long dining room setup, serving ourselves food, making conversation. Someone joked that my sister must be exhausted from all those shopping trips, since she always looked so well-dressed lately. The room laughed lightly, but my sister stiffened almost imperceptibly. I didn't plan to speak then, but the opportunity slid right into place. I turned toward the cousin and said calmly, "Funny you mentioned that. Someone's been doing a lot of shopping under my name too." The entire table paused, not dramatically, just enough to feel the air shift. My sister's fork froze midair. Aunt Linda looked at me with mild confusion. "What do you mean, honey?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look angry. I simply said, "My identity was stolen, and I've been collecting proof." A murmur spread across the table like a small ripple in quiet water. My sister jumped in immediately. "Oh, Ruby, come on. You're still on this? We talked about it." "We didn't talk about anything," I replied gently. "You spoke. I wasn't allowed to." Dad set down his glass a little too hard. "Maybe this isn't the place for." "It is," I said, turning toward him slowly. "This involves the whole family now, doesn't it?" He blinked, thrown off by my tone, the steadiness he didn't recognize because he'd never seen me speak without fear in my voice. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the first item. The grainy footage from the home goods store, paused on the frame showing the woman who looked exactly like me walking out with bags. My sister's face drained of color. "What is that?" Uncle Ben asked, leaning closer. "Video," I replied, "of someone using my name, my information, and my account." I held up the phone so the people nearest could see. A few gasped softly. Others tilted their heads, comparing the woman on screen to me. "That's not Ruby," one cousin whispered. "She doesn't walk like that." "That's her twin," another said. My sister swallowed, her hand tightening around her napkin. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "That video is old and grainy. Anybody could look like." I pulled out the printed signature from the bank. "This is the signature they accepted for a card issued in my name," I said. "Not mine." The banker confirmed it. Dad rubbed his forehead, clearly overwhelmed, but before he could speak, Aunt Linda, blunt as always, asked the question that pierced the room. Sweetheart, were you pretending to be Ruby? My sister's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted between me, the video, the signature, and Dad. Her confidence was slipping fast, melting at the edges. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply unfolded the last piece. The old text messages. The questions she'd asked. The excuses she'd made. The small details she'd gathered long before the fraud began. When I laid them on the table, the room went silent. My sister stared at them like she'd never seen them before, even though she had typed every word. Her breathing grew shallow. Her jaw tightened. And then, right when the silence felt like it might crack the room in half, she whispered, I didn't mean for it to go that far. Dad's head snapped toward her. Go that far, he repeated. She froze. She hadn't meant to say that. Slipped out, finally something honest. I watched everything change in his face. The confusion. The shock. The slow realization. The disappointment. The hurt. He turned toward me with an expression I hadn't seen from him in years, one that held regret and something close to apology. But I wasn't finished. I needed them all to understand the whole truth. And the reunion had become the one place where nothing could stay hidden. The silence after the revelation at the reunion was heavy, almost suffocating. I felt it pressing against my chest, my stomach, and even the backs of my knees. I wanted to move, to speak, but nothing came out. My sister's face had gone pale, her eyes darting wildly from person to person as if searching for an escape. She looked exactly like me, yet entirely alien. Like I was staring at a shadow that had stepped too far into the light. Dad was the first to break the silence. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a long, shaky breath. Ruby. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of a father who had finally seen the truth and hated what he'd ignored. I nodded once, silently, not needing an apology. It was enough that he had finally recognized it. My sister's lips quivered. Then she opened her mouth and finally words came. I didn't think it would get this far. I just wanted to borrow a little here, a little there. I didn't think anyone would notice. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and I could see the panic clawing at her. The charm she usually relied on, the easy laugh, the quick apology, the smile that melted suspicion was gone. You took everything, I said quietly, looking directly at her. Not just my money. You took my life. You took my trust in this family. You made everyone doubt me, and you made me leave the only home I had. I felt a tremor of anger, but beneath it was something steadier. A sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't just reacting. I was facing the storm and standing firm. Aunt Linda cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the tension. Enough hiding behind excuses. You've got the proof here. She gestured toward the table where the footage, the signatures, and the messages were neatly displayed. Everyone can see it. There's no more room for denial. For a moment, my sister looked like she wanted to vanish. Her hand shook as she reached for her drink, knocking it slightly onto the table. Dad's face tightened, a mixture of shock and disappointment. And then, surprisingly, some relief washed over me. Relief not because she was caught, but because the truth was finally undeniable. There was no way for her lies to overshadow what had been done. The conversation grew louder as other relatives began speaking up. My cousins shared what they had noticed, the inconsistencies, the stories that didn't add up, the strange charges they'd overheard. My uncle pointed out a gift he'd seen my sister buy, which she had claimed came from her own account, but which matched a transaction from my stolen card. With every detail they added, the weight of the evidence pressed further, and my sister's composure crumbled entirely. Finally she spoke, voice trembling. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you, Ruby. I didn't think it mattered. It would have been easy to respond with anger, to shout, to accuse. But I didn't. I realized in that moment that revenge wouldn't fix anything. The truth was already out. Justice wasn't about punishment in this room. It was about reclaiming my life. Instead, I said slowly, it mattered more than you could ever know. And it still does. But right now, I need something different from you, honesty. Not excuses. Not lies. Just honesty. She nodded weakly, tears brimming in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the little sister I once knew, the one who hadn't yet been consumed by envy and selfishness. But it was fleeting. The fallout from the reunion began immediately. Dad insisted on taking my sister aside while I stayed in the living room with a few cousins who wanted to understand the full story. I answered questions, explained the evidence, and tried to remain calm even as my chest tightened and my hands shook with adrenaline. The relief of finally being heard was mingled with an exhaustion that felt like it might sink me into the floor. One cousin asked about the bank, and I walked them through every detail: the signature mismatch, the fraudulent cards, and the way the bank had recognized that the ID didn't match. Another asked about the video footage, and I carefully showed them the store clips, pausing on frames where my twin's posture and features mirrored mine. Each time I watched, I felt a mixture of grief and empowerment. Watching her actions laid bare for everyone to see was painful, yes, but it was also freeing. Dad eventually returned, looking more composed but still strained. "Ruby, I can't believe I didn't see this sooner," he said quietly. "I pushed you out because I believed her lies and I—" He stopped abruptly, running a hand down his face. "I don't know how to make this right. But I do know you've been through hell, and I want to fix it." I nodded, still processing everything. I didn't need him to fix my life. I needed him to acknowledge it. And hearing him finally admit the truth was like a release valve opening after months of pressure. My sister, meanwhile, was silent, sitting on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. No more smiles. No more charm. The confident mask had shattered completely, leaving only the person who had done all the damage, vulnerable, fearful, and exposed. "I want to make things right," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll pay back the money, I'll—" "Stop," I interrupted gently, holding up a hand. "That's not what matters right now. The money is replaceable. What's harder to fix is trust. You can't erase the months you lied, the nights I cried, the life I lost. That's not something you can just hand back." She nodded slowly, understanding dawning, and I realized I didn't want to lecture her endlessly. I wanted the truth acknowledged, and then, eventually, I wanted to move on. There was a strange freedom in that moment, an unexpected weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since Dad had kicked me out, I felt like I was standing firmly in my own life again. Not just surviving, not just defending myself, existing fully, with everyone finally seeing who I was. After the initial confrontation, the rest of the reunion passed in an awkward, cautious way. Conversations were softer, voices gentler, and laughter came in small, careful bursts. My sister stayed quiet, occasionally whispering to Dad, who listened and nodded. I wandered through the house, letting the familiar smells of home, the apple pies, the polished wood floors, the faint scent of Dad's cologne lingering in the hallways, remind me that life didn't end the moment she betrayed me. A few hours later, I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sky had turned a deep orange, fading into purple as the sun set behind the trees. I leaned against the porch railing, letting the quiet wash over me. Everything inside me had been raw, chaotic, and heavy earlier. Now there was a calm I hadn't felt in months. I checked my phone briefly and saw messages from a couple of cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They were offering help, support, and kind words. One simply said, "Ruby, I always knew it wasn't you. So glad the truth is out." I smiled, a small, genuine smile that came from deep inside. It wasn't about winning against my sister. It wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about finally being able to breathe, knowing that my life, my story, and my identity were mine to reclaim. The weeks that followed the reunion were strange but healing. My sister agreed to start repaying the money she had taken, not because I demanded it, but because the exposure had left her with no more room to maneuver. She went through legal channels and began correcting the fraudulent charges, and I let the process unfold slowly, without rushing or micromanaging. Each corrected transaction, each small acknowledgement, felt like a tiny victory. But the real victory was in knowing the truth had surfaced. Dad began spending time with me differently, quietly asking how I was, inviting me to dinner, and listening without judgment. The walls that had built up between us over months of silence slowly eroded. I saw glimpses of the father I remembered, human, flawed, but willing to change. Even my sister and I, despite everything, began to establish a fragile understanding. She didn't ask for forgiveness immediately, and I didn't offer it. But we spoke cautiously about small things, childhood memories, shared family recipes, and even mundane updates about our lives. It was strange, uncomfortable, and tentative, but it was a start. Most importantly, I discovered freedom in ways I hadn't expected. Freedom wasn't about seeing my sister punished or dad's approval restored. Freedom was in reclaiming my mornings, deciding how to spend my time, and not carrying the weight of lies and betrayal in secret. I returned to the diner, worked my shifts, and felt pride in my own independence. I reconnected with friends who had doubted nothing, letting their support reinforce the life I had rebuilt. One evening, as I closed the diner and walked to my car, the autumn wind brushing my cheeks, I realized I hadn't felt this light in months. The storm had passed. The truth had spoken. The fallout was messy and painful, but it had cleared the path for me to be myself again. And for the first time, I understood that the freedom I'd been chasing wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about trusting myself, trusting my instincts, and reclaiming my life piece by piece, on my own terms. I breathed in deeply, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but I no longer feared it. Because for the first time in a long while, I had a life that was mine, and no one, not even my twin, could take it from me again.